South Park is quite possibly the most consistently controversial television show in history, tackling even the most sensitive, hot-button issues with its shameless toilet humor, constant lampooning of celebrities and political figures, and the ability to boil down even the most nuanced issues into their most absurd possible conclusions.
What is this? What's going on?
You agreed to the iTunes terms and conditions too?
With this in mind, it's no wonder that the show has had its fair share of critics, detractors, detesters, protesters, and haters. However, despite these controversies, multiple lawsuits, and countless petitions for cancellation, the show has had only 5 episodes completely pulled from syndication, that is, circulation on network television. And these 5 episodes are The Super Best Friends, Cartoon Wars Part 1 and 2, and 200 and 201. Of these 5 episodes, only the 2 episodes that make up Cartoon Wars are available for purchase online. The remaining 3 of them are only available to view legally when you purchase their respective seasons on physical media. These 5 episodes all have one thing in common: depictions of the Muslim prophet Muhammad. And in order to properly discuss these episodes, we are going to need a little bit of context, so I'll try to be quick. Visual depictions of Muhammad have always been contentious in the history of Islam. While the Quran does not explicitly prohibit such depictions, there are some supplemental ahadith, which to my understanding is a sort of Quran DLC, that imply the prohibition of any visual depiction of any living creature. And so most Muslims avoid visually depicting any prophet, like Moses or Abraham, as well as Muhammad. These ahadith are essentially notes of extra things that Muhammad did and said. They make up a source of religious and moral guidance known as the Sunnah, which is the way that Muhammad was said to have lived his life. So while the Quran exists as the word of Muhammad, the Sunnah is the way in which he lived his life. And these two things form the foundations of Islam. Within Islam itself, most Sunni Muslims believe that depictions of Muhammad should be entirely prohibited. However, this is not entirely the case with Shia Muslims. Now, with all of this in mind, I think it's also important to talk about the Muhammad cartoon controversy that began in 2005. On September 30th, 2005, a Danish newspaper called I'm not going to try to say that, I'm sorry, published a set of 12 cartoons, and in 10 of these, there were direct visual representations of Muhammad, and all 12 of them referenced him in one way or another. This came at a time in which the relationship between the Western world and the Muslim world was arguably even worse than it is now, with the tension from the September 11th attacks still fresh in the minds of many Westerners, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan raging on. And while there were many peaceful global protests as a result of these cartoons, there were some that did become violent. Over 200 people died across the world, with riots, attacks on foreign embassies, and attacks on Christian missionary trips taking place between January and mid-February of 2006. Now, I'm not saying that the warmongering of the United States government in the Middle East that extends into the modern era that came in the wake of September 11th was justified, nor am I at all saying that the attempted attacks on editors and cartoonists from extremists that followed the publication of these cartoons is justified either. I'm just trying to provide context for the world in which these controversies were occurring. And speaking of attempted attacks, cartoonist Kurt Westergaard, who drew one of the images, was the target of not 1, not 2, but 3 separate assassination attempts between 2010 and 2013. He would eventually pass away in his sleep at the age of 86 in July of 2021. So with all of this context in mind, let's begin running through these episodes in chronological order, starting with The Super Best Friends. The Super Best Friends begins with magician David Blaine performing magic tricks on the street of South Park. After the boys see this performance, they become followers of Blaintology. This is of course a spoof of Scientology. Stan quickly becomes disillusioned with the cult and tries to convince Kyle to leave with him, but by this point he's too dug into the ideology of the cult to leave. While Kyle and Cartman begin going door to door in an attempt to recruit more people to Blaintology, Stan meets with Jesus to try and come up with a plan to save his friends. To show Stan that he's just as good of a magician as David Blaine, Jesus turns water into wine. And then in a showdown with David Blaine, he performs the fish and bread miracle by doing the exact same thing.
Behold, I have here 5 loaves of bread and 3 fish. Certainly not enough to feed this entire crowd, but now, turn around. Turn around. Okay, now turn back.
Now, how the hell did he do that?
However, David Blaine's magic proves to be too powerful for Jesus, and he calls on the help of the Super Best Friends, a group of heroes whose roster includes Jesus, Buddha, John Smith of the Mormon religion, Krishna, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, and of course, Seaman. This group of religious figures, led by Moses, who appears in a form very similar to Zordon from Power Rangers, exist to spread peace and fight evil, except for Buddha, apparently, who doesn't really believe in evil. The team begins to try and figure out a plan to save the Blaintologists from their cult behavior. Meanwhile, the Blaintologists have received word that the government has rejected their tax-exempt status as a religious institution. In response, David Blaine orders them all to gather in Washington, D.C. and commit a mass cessation of life, if you get my meaning. They will no longer be breathing air, one may say. I hate this fucking website sometimes. Upon hearing of this, Stan and the Super Best Friends spring to action and head to Washington, D.C., where David Blaine brings to life the Lincoln Memorial to try and stop them. At the advice of Moses, of all people, the Super Best Friends create a giant stone John Wilkes Booth to take out Lincoln, and David Blaine escapes in a rocket ship, abandoning his followers. Of the 5 banned episodes, this one has the least to talk about, because at the time of its airing, it was actually the least controversial. It aired in July of 2001, just 2 months before the attacks of September 11th. The episode sparked almost no backlash when it aired, and much like every other episode of the show that attempts to depict Muhammad, he's literally just part of the story. He actually has lines and dialogue, and he doesn't really do anything that would be considered disrespectful to Islam or its beliefs. However, after the controversies that surrounded the depictions of Muhammad that would come in the years after this episode's airing, it would eventually be pulled from syndication entirely, following threats to the Comedy Central network in 2010 after the airing of Cartoon Wars Part 1 and 2. Cartoon Wars Part 1 and 2 would air in April of 2006, just 2 months after the end of global protests following the publications of the Dutch newspaper cartoons. The episodes primarily satirized censorship, with further points made about how the censorship of art purely for the sake of others' safety can result in a slippery slope that results in everybody believing that the things that they're passionate about or like are somehow off limits to joke about. Now, just to take a quick sidebar here, when it concerns comedy, I'm absolutely not one of those people who's going around saying, you can't joke about anything, everybody's so women, and not to detract potential subscribers, but if you're the kind of person that does have that sentiment, you're gonna be a little bit disappointed about the rest of the stuff you find on this channel. That being said, I do believe that you can joke about anything. I think you can make a joke about any kind of subject and make it truly funny, but there is a little addendum here. This requires you to write a good joke, and I think that far too many people miss this point. Making offensive jokes for the sake of making offensive jokes with no nuance or meaning or nothing else to say is kind of just punching down and being a dick or a shock comedian. Art that makes us uncomfortable and allows us to think about things is good, actually. We don't always have to consume media in which we like the characters or the things they do or the actions they take. If the narrative of the story is telling us that these characters are bad and what they're doing is wrong, and our investment in said narrative depends on this character getting what's coming to them, then their actions, no matter how awful, are being inherently condemned. And yes, you have people with no media literacy who glean the wrong messages from such narratives, but the point still stands. And before we get too carried away here, yes, I know South Park isn't exactly subtle or nuanced most of the time, and their extreme level of absurdist humor makes taking the smaller messages from some of their episodes to be a little more difficult, but the point is, the ability to write a good joke opens your world to what you can joke about, and these episodes are pretty amazing examples of that. Cartoon Wars begins with the entire town of South Park in a panic.
Kyle, what the hell is going on this time? I have no idea.
Because the television show Family Guy plans to air an episode of the show that depicts the Prophet Muhammad. Apparently, leaders of certain terrorist groups have threatened to violently retaliate should the episode actually be allowed to air. The Fox network censors the episode at the last minute, preventing the image from actually being shown. However, this episode was only one of a 2-part episode, and after threats of quitting from the Family Guy writing staff, the uncensored image of the Prophet will be allowed to be shown the following week. Cartman, in an uncharacteristic move that appears appears to be morally righteous, says that a show as big as Family Guy shouldn't be poking fun at the religions of others, and that if the lives of hundreds or even millions of people are at stake, then this episode absolutely must be pulled. When the other boys try to call him out on this line of thinking, he responds with this.
Since when do you care about being sensitive to people's religion, Cartman?
Yeah, you rip on people's religion all the time. That's different. I'm just a little boy. That's a cartoon. Millions of people watch it. How would you feel, Cal, if there was a cartoon on television that made fun of Jews all the time, huh? I'm telling you guys, it's wrong. It's wrong!
After Kyle has a nightmare about his little brother Ike dying in a nuclear explosion following the airing of the episode, he changes his mind and decides to join Cartman on his quest. Meanwhile, the entire country begins working on a plan to avoid retaliation from terrorist groups, and begins literally burying their heads in the sand. On the way to Los Angeles, Cartman accidentally lets it slip to Kyle that what he really means to do is to get Family Guy canceled entirely. His logic is that by pulling this one episode, it will create a chain reaction that will allow other groups to voice their dissatisfaction with being made fun of or poked fun at. And so eventually, so many episodes will be getting pulled from broadcast that the show will be forced into cancellation. Kyle, upset by this obvious betrayal that he really should have seen coming by now, tries to stop Cartman, but is run off the road. Cartman eventually makes it to the Family Guy studio in Los Angeles, where he meets Bart Simpson, another boy who wants to get the episode pulled. This part of the episode has one of my favorite interactions in the whole show, with Bart and Cartman trying to one-up each other with how bad they are, and Cartman immediately scaring Bart off.
I'm a pretty bad kid. Really? What's the worst thing you've ever done? I stole the head off a statue once. Wow, that's pretty hardcore. Jeez. That's like this one time when I didn't like a kid, so I ground his parents up into chili and fed it to him. You got it, man. You got it. See ya.
Cartman then poses as a little boy who is a victim of a suicide bombing and attempts to speak to the writers of Family Guy, but is incredibly surprised when they turn out to be a team of 5 manatees. And as we all know,
they're the only mammals that are completely unmoved by terrorist threats.
And so Cartman's pleas fall on deaf ears. Kyle manages to make it to LA and is captured by Bart, who is helping Cartman in his plan to get the episode pulled. Kyle manages to escape, and the two engage in a riveting final battle.
I guess it was inevitable. Let this be our final battle. Ow! Stop it! Kyle, that's too hard! Kyle, stop it! Ow! Quit it! Quit it! Kyle, let's get... Stop it! Quit it! Quit it! Kyle, let's get... Okay, time out! Kyle, time out! Time in.
The episode ends with the Fox network deciding to air the episode despite the threats. And while Matt Stone and Trey Parker did originally want to show the clip of Muhammad here, Comedy Central would absolutely not allow it, which sort of enhances the episode. This episode is so crazy because in the years that have followed it, people seem to remember it more for its criticism of Family Guy than anything else, even its depictions of Muhammad. In the weeks leading up to the episode, the South Park team aired several promos for the episodes on Comedy Central, openly wondering whether the network would stand for free speech or backtrack, with them ending up backtracking in the interest of public safety. The airing of this episode also came just a few weeks after Comedy Central pulled a rerun of a different South Park episode, Season 9's Trapped in the Closet, which also poked fun at Scientology. The episode also garnered a fair bit of criticism due to its portrayal of Jesus, with William Anthony Donahue of the Catholic League being quoted the following from NBC. "The ultimate hypocrite is not Comedy Central. That's their decision to not show the image of Muhammad or not. It's Parker and Stone." He goes on to say, "Like little whores, they'll sit around and grab the bucks. They'll sit there and they'll whine and they'll take their shots at Jesus. That's their stock in the trade." Parker and Stone would go on to make Donahue a villain in the season 11 episode, The Fantastic Easter Special, which almost certainly is the absolute best episode of the entire show.
First, you have to promise you won't hurt it, and that you'll let everybody go.
We promise. We swear it on the cross. Take them into custody.
Hey, what the hell?
Bill, we have the rabbit. It's all we need. Don't be soft, your holiness. These whores must be punished in front of everyone.
You swore on the cross, Fatso.
Yeah. Too bad for you. It was a double cross. Oh, we should have seen that coming.
So, they kind of got the last laugh on that one. The last episodes we're going to be talking about are episodes 200 and 201. And these episodes are so awesome because they bring back plot threads from almost every season that came before it and rehashes them in a way that makes for an absolute roller coaster of nostalgia, unexpected plot twists, and just sheer insanity. The episode opens with the boys' 4th grade class taking a tour of a local candy and confectionery factory when Stan notices that Tom Cruise is one of the people who is packing fudge on the line, resulting in this exchange.
Guys, check it out. Tom Cruise is a fudge packer.
What did you call me?
Hey, that is Tom Cruise. How come you're packing fudge, Mr. Cruise?
I'm not a fudge packer.
Dude, you don't have to be ashamed or anything.
But I'm not a fudge packer.
Then why are you packing fudge?
I'm not. I'm a very busy actor. I'm just here trying to get away for a weekend and do some fly fishing.
Dude, you are in a fudge factory packing fudge.
Oh, that does it. I will sue you.
Tom Cruise decides to sue the entire town of South Park, gathering over 200 other celebrities and political figures who have been slandered by the town over the years to form a class action lawsuit. However, Tom Cruise actually has a hidden agenda. He knows that the people of South Park have a close relationship with a group of people known as the Super Best Friends, and specifically Mohammed. Tom Cruise has teamed up with Rob Reiner to create a machine that will take Muhammad's goo, a sort of life force energy that they theorize will make them all immune to being made fun of or ridiculed. It's not long before Cartman shows up at Tom Cruise's house, but he's arriving as an escort for another celebrity.
Jennifer Lopez! Hey, Jen! Ah! Oh, wow!
Yes, I am Jennifer Lopez, and I like tacos and burritos.
However, Jennifer Lopez is actually a small-time swindler named Mitch Connor, and he and Cartman are scheming to steal Muhammad's goo for themselves to sell on the black market. While Kyle and Stan try to figure out a way to allow for the transfer of Muhammad to these celebrities without him being seen in any way, they hit a snag in their operation when a group of ginger kids plan to take Muhammad for themselves. They plant bombs all around South Park, threatening to detonate them if Muhammad isn't handed over to them. With this in mind, the townsfolk decide to hand Muhammad over to them so as to spare the town from destruction. However, once the celebrities get wind of this, they activate their strongest fighter, Mecha Streisand.
Babura, Babura, ichiban kirai na hito. Babura, Babura, hana ga oki. Hey, Barbara. It's me, Rob Reiner.
It's at this point that Cartman begins to grow tired of his and Mitch's scheme and claims that it's gotten way too far out of hand. He threatens to walk out on the plan. That is, until Mitch tells him that he can give Cartman information about his father. Now, at the end of season 1, there was a big mystery as to who Cartman's father was, and the show did a whole 2-part special on it. In the cliffhanger, Cartman's dad was narrowed down to several possible suspects.
Who is Eric Cartman's father? Is it Chief Running Water? Or is it Chef? Is it Mephisto? Or that little monkey guy that follows him around? Or is it Mr. Garrison?
No, he's gay.
You go to hell! You go to hell and you die! Is it Jimbo?
Ah!
Or is it Officer Barbrady?
Huh? Where?
Or could it be Ned?
Could be.
Or Mr. Broflovsky?
Dad, how could you?
Or is it the 1991 Denver Broncos?
However, in the second part of the episode, Cartman's mom was revealed to be a hermaphrodite and was actually Cartman's biological father. Mitch tells Cartman that this was a lie created by the adults in town and that he knows the identity of Cartman's real father. Back in South Park, the boys work with the townsfolk and the Super Best Friends to trick the ginger kids into thinking they'll hand Muhammad over to them. But the plan goes completely awry when the town is attacked by Mecha Streisand and the celebrities, and eventually all of the boys and Muhammad are captured by the ginger kids. Once they arrive in the ginger kids' lair, Cartman is taken away to speak to the head ginger, a one Scott Tenorman. Now, for those of you who clicked on this video and are somehow not familiar with one of South Park's most popular episodes, in the season 5 episode titled Scott Tenorman Must Die, Cartman is being horrendously ridiculed by the titular Scott Tenorman.
Now say, I'm a little piggy.
What?
Say it.
I'm a little piggy.
Here's my snout.
Here's my snout.
Oink, oink, oink.
Oink, oink, oink.
Now dance, little piggy. Dance and oink for me.
I'm a little piggy. Here's my snout. Oink, oink, oink. Oink, oink, oink.
I'm a little piggy.
And Cartman, he eventually has enough of this, so he decides to fight back, like any normal kid would. He lures Scott's parents to the farm of a gun-toting redneck farmer who shoots trespassers on sight. This, of course, resulted in both of them being shot. Cartman then took their bodies and used them to make chili, which he then fed to Scott.
Taste your tears, Scott. Your tears are so yummy and sweet. Dude, I think it might be best for us to never piss Cartman off again. Good call. Oh, the tears of unfathomable sadness. Yummy. Yummy, you guys.
You know, typical kid stuff. Scott tells Cartman that this incident put him into a psychiatric hospital for months, and in that time, he learned everything he could about Cartman. Scott goes on to say that his father had previously played for the Denver Broncos, and not long after he met Scott's mother, he had an affair with a woman named Leanne Cartman, revealing that Jack Tenorman was also Cartman's father. Guys, I can't stress enough that when I watched this episode, it absolutely blew my fucking mind. I watched this episode when it first aired, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but I was fucking amazed. While all of this insanity is going on, a massive fight breaks out in the Ginger Kids' lair between the super best friends, the Gingers, and the celebrities. Tom Cruise eventually manages to strap himself into the goo machine, and a black censored bar covers his entire body. However, when the people in the room begin to make jokes about him and ridicule him despite the black bar, it just disappears. Confused about this, Tom Cruise asks why this is happening, and Kyle, Santa, and Jesus go on to explain that the only true way to get people to stop making fun of you is violence. I remember watching this episode live when I was like 13 or 14 when it aired on Comedy Central, and literally this entire speech was censored. It was like just one long beep. I'm gonna try to find a clip of it just to show you.
That's because there is no goo, Mr. Cruz. You see, I learned something today.
That's right. Don't you see, Gingers? That's right, friends.
This episode garnered quite a bit of controversy because, unlike Cartoon Wars Part 1 and 2, there were explicit threats made directly to Matt Stone and Trey Parker, as well as Comedy Central, due to the showing of Muhammad. In the week between the airing of 201 and 202, a New York-based Muslim extremist group called Revolution Muslim made an online post implying that Stone and Parker would wind up suffering the same fate as Theo Van Gogh, a filmmaker who was murdered in 2004 after making a short film about the violence and brutality that women faced in some Islamic countries. In the wake of these threats, Comedy Central censored episode 201 so heavily that even the mention of Muhammad's name was censored each time it was spoken. Neither of these two episodes ever went into syndication on Comedy Central. They never aired again, nor were they ever available on South Park Studios, which usually had the episodes up the day after airing. None of these 5 episodes are available on any of the streaming services in which South Park is available. Cartoon Wars is kind of an exception because it's available on the iTunes store for like digital download, but it does need to be purchased. The remaining 3 episodes can only be viewed by purchasing their respective seasons on physical media. And I think that this is a good argument for the case of purchasing physical media when you can. It can never be taken down from the streaming service, the file can never be removed from anything, you always have that physical copy. As a matter of fact, for this video, I bought Cartoon Wars 1 and 2 on Apple TV, but get this, Apple still encrypted the files. So I was completely unable to grab screen recordings from the media that I purchased because it's still encrypted by Apple. I also think that it's really interesting that these episodes became lost in the first place, and the entire reason why they became lost is kind of crazy to me also. Because if we back down to the threats of violence and terror from extremist groups, then the terrorists win, don't they? I realize from a business standpoint, it's a hard decision to make. You have the liability of anything happening to worry about, the potential negative PR if you ignore the threats if something goes wrong, and ideally you have the idea that your employees deserve a safe space to work. At the same time, a television network and the shows that it makes are outlets for the creators to spread their voice and their messages and entertain us. And when you start to give in to groups who are being made uncomfortable by your art, then what is there to think about? What is there to challenge your worldview? What is there to allow us to speak freely? Like I said before, I truly think that as long as you write a good enough joke, you really can joke about anything. But I'd really love to know what you guys think. Are there some things that are off limits to you? If you feel that there's a line, where do you believe that it is? Leave a comment letting me know. And if you like this video, be sure to click that little thumb and don't forget to subscribe. It really helps me out a lot. As always, guys, my name is Isaiah and thank you for watching my video.